Good morning, second graders. We have finally made it to the last day of April. Before we get started, I need you to grab two things for me. Um, Actually, two pieces of paper, and make sure that at least one of them is a rectangle shape, and a pencil. So go ahead and pause and grab those things for me and come right back. Okay, welcome back. Thanks for grabbing those things with me. Let's start out by saying our date together, please, out loud. Today is Thursday, April 30th, 2020. And you guessed it, I want you to take one of your pieces of paper and a pencil, and I would like you to write the date two different ways using words and numbers. So go ahead and pause and write today's date in words and numbers, and we'll check it when you get back. Okay, second graders, let's check your work. This is what the date should look like in words, making sure that you have your capitals and your commas in the right spot. And this is what your date should look like in numbers. And for the very last time this month, let's go ahead and flip over that card on April 30th and see what we have. Okay, I want you to keep that picture in your brain of what you see. I wonder if you know what this vegetable is on the plate. It is called a beet. If you have not eaten a beet before, you should give them a try. They're pretty good. Okay, so on our chart here, oh, it's not the 29th, it is the 30th. And we have a set for our last card. And do you remember what was on that card? Shout it out. How many items did we have, and what were those items again? We had one corn and we had one beet. For our last day together of April, we are going to go ahead and look back at these four calendar markers from our calendar, the 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. And I am going to come up with two observations for you. And then I would like you to use your paper and pencil to write observations for the other two. Before I do some observations with you, I just wanted to remind you of what we talked about yesterday in those big fraction words that we talked about, the numerator and denominator. Remember that the denominator is the number below the fraction line to show the number of equal parts that the whole is divided into. I like to think, and this is kind of silly, but my second graders remember this when I tell them this, the denominator is on the bottom, kind of like a dungeon. If you think of a big castle and where is the dungeon? Well, it's in the lower level. It's in kind of the basement. The dungeon, the denominator, both start with D's. So maybe that'll help you remember that the denominator is the number below the fraction line on the bottom in the dungeon. And it shows the number of equal parts that the whole is divided into. And now on to our other word that we learned yesterday, the numerator. And I wanted to remind you that the numerator is the number above the fraction line. Remember, here's the fraction line. It's the number above the fraction line. And it shows the number of parts that we are thinking about. Well, let's think about our bodies for a second. What part of our body do we think with? We think with our brain, right? And where is our brain? It's on top of our body. And so hopefully you can think about that the numerator is the part that we are thinking about with our brain, and that our brain is on top of our body, and that will help us remember the numerator and where that goes. Okay, so now it is time for observations. I'm going to do the first two cards, so the 25th and 26th, and then I'm going to want you to write some observations for the 27th and 28th. So yesterday we talked about how there are lots of fractions that we could write for these cards, and it depends on what we're thinking about. We could be thinking about, let me back up for a second, that these are all wholes. So we have whole garden beds here, and they are divided into equal parts. And you'll notice that when those garden beds are divided into equal parts, some of the parts are planted with these beautiful flowers, and some of the parts are just soil. And so I could write a fraction for the parts that have flowers in them, or I could write a fraction for the parts that just have soil. So for the 25th, I am going to write a fraction for the part that has the flowers, the pretty flowers growing in it. But when I write a fraction, I always like to think of the denominator. Remember the bottom number, the one that's in the dungeon, in the castle, because I like to see how many total parts my whole is split into first. So let's count that up together. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm keeping in my brain here that I have 4 total parts. Now, I told you that I wanted to think about the flowered parts for my fraction for the numerator. So as I'm thinking with my brain, I know that thinking part goes in the numerator spot. So I'm thinking about the flowers. How many parts have flowers? 1. 1 out of 4, or 1/4. So 1/4 of the garden has flowers. Well, let's spell flowers right. Now, for the 26th, I am going to flip my thinking, and I am going to think about the garden part that is soil this time. Now, you'll notice, remember, the first thing I like to think about is the denominator, how many parts my whole garden bed is split up into. So I see 3 equal parts, but I am thinking about the numerator, my brain. I'm thinking about the soil parts this time. So I'm noticing that 2 parts out of 3 total parts is our soil. So that makes the fraction 2/3 is soil. Now again, second graders, what I really want you to do is take that piece of paper and pencil and write down observations on your piece of paper, what you observe off calendar marker 27 and 28. So go ahead and pause this video and write down your observations, and then come right back. I have more for you. Welcome back. I hope that you're able to write down some observations either for the flowers, the fraction of flowers, or the fraction for the soil, or even an equation. I forgot to remind you about that. Maybe some of you did an equation. Well, I do have one more activity for us to do before we close out April Number Corner. It's called The Triplets Plant a Garden. And let me read this to you. It says, here are the triplets, Abby, Brisa, and Carrie. They're planning to build a rectangular raised garden bed. They want to divide their bed into 3 equal parts, thirds, so they can each plant their favorite vegetable. Right now, they are making their plans on paper. They are getting very frustrated because they can't figure out how to divide a rectangle into thirds. Here's what Abby says. When we fold a rectangle in half, we get halves like this. And Brisa says, when we fold it in half again, we get fourths. We tried a couple of different ways, but we always get 4 parts instead of 3. And then Carrie says, I thought if we folded the rectangle 3 times, we would get thirds, but we got eighths instead. Abby, Brisa, and Carrie, can you help us? If we can't even divide our rectangle into equal parts, how are we going to divide our raised bed into thirds? So second graders, it is time to help these triplets out. I want you to grab your rectangular piece of paper that I had you get at the beginning. If you don't have one right now, pause and grab just a rectangular piece of paper. It can be out of a notebook, from your printer. It could just be a page out of a magazine as long as you ask permission first before you rip it out. But any piece of rectangle paper, we're going to need that in order to try to fold it into thirds. So what I want you to try to do is pause the video, and I want you to try to fold this piece of paper into 3 equal parts. It's a lot harder than you think. So go ahead and pause, and then I'll come back with the answers. Okay, well, welcome back. Like the triplets said, it's really difficult to divide a rectangle into 3 equal pieces. A lot of kids, second graders, what they try to do first is they take their piece of paper and they fold it in half, and then they fold it again, and they open it up, and they're like, oh, we should have 3 equal pieces. Wait, there's 4. Okay, back to square one. And so it's really, really tricky. And let me show you how to fold a piece of paper into thirds. Okay, so first what you have to do, we'll try to get a close-up here, is you have to, and maybe I can show you a side view, you kind of fold one of the edges in just a little bit, and the other overlaps like this. I don't know if you can see that. When you smush it then and make those creases, let's see if you can see that, you will get thirds. So it's kind of like if you've ever gotten a pamphlet for anything. Sometimes pamphlets are what you call trifold. But once I open that up, I have 3 equal pieces. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so I'm going to take another rectangle here. And you'll notice that, and let me draw the lines in. My lines are like this, but I want to show you how I can do long lines going across my paper like this. So same concept though, is you have to tri-fold it. Fold it down a little bit and then fold the bottom up like that. And smush it together. You should have 3 equal pieces, the best you can. Just like that. So this is how you fold a rectangle into 3 equal pieces. You'll notice because the camera, my 3s are backwards, but I did write them the correct way, I promise. I want to show you one last way that second graders sometimes divide rectangles into 3 equal, or they try to divide it into 3 equal pieces. You'll notice that if I cut here and cut here, I would have 1, 2, 3 pieces, but are they equal? I don't think so. Well, thanks for joining me for that activity today and for April Number Corner. I will see you again in May for more Number Corners. Bye. Take care. Be well.